Let me.
Oh, it's on. It's on. It's recording.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Team Alike session, where we get to share, good morning, where we get to share our concerns and our issues related to restarting and rejoining our campuses or our efforts to serve students who have unique abilities in this pandemic. And I know that from some of the sessions that I had an opportunity to visit with so far, we've had lots and lots of questions about how we restart and what we need to do. So in other words, my name is Gwen Williams, and my co-partner is B, and she will introduce herself, and then we will get started with our moderation.
Yeah. Well, my name is B. Awani. I'm at Santa Fe College. So welcome everyone, and thanks for your commitments to working with students with unique abilities. It's great to be here with you all, and we are hoping to have shared time of learning and be able to take something back to our program so we can continue to do good work that you all have been doing. So since we might not have too much time going, I don't think we need to go to introduce ourselves, but maybe when you want to contribute or maybe when you want to share something, it will be helpful if you can say the institution that you belong to. That way, that would be kind of the introduction. What do you think about that, Gwen?
I think that's an excellent idea. And I also think that when we are not speaking, if there are noises in the background, we might want to mute ourselves. And then we have to remember that when we start to speak, we need to unmute ourselves. I've been told several times that my mouth is moving, but they can't hear a word that I'm saying. So with that being said, we have several questions that we have thought about. But we also know that you have questions that you want to ask and issues that you might want to share related to how we're going to get started in this new virtual environment with our students and how we're going to help to keep them safe. So I will start with a question related to any virtual resources that you may have found that can help us as we move forward in this environment. And if you would like to begin, anyone, then please do so. I know that there were some people who had some questions from the team that I facilitated on yesterday.
And it's been more than 3 months since we've been away from many of our campuses. We know you guys have been doing work, good work. So what are some of those resources that you've found?
So I'll talk. Terry from UCF, from the Center for Autism. And the CARD centers around the states have been hosting forums and social events and other kinds of activities for the adults. So we were doing a forum that was related to looking for employment, and it kind of turned into a forum of what do you do when you've been furloughed or let go. So they started really practicing some anxiety management kind of activities in those, and those have been reported to be pretty helpful by our adults.
So if I may ask a follow-up question about that anxiety management, are there specific resources that they're using, or those are facilitated? You know, just
they're facilitated, but they're also introducing them to some apps that they can use on their own afterward. To help them with it's sort of mindfulness activities and things like that. I can kind of, while other people are talking, I'll pull up some of those resources and put them in the chat.
Thanks, that's perfect.
So is anxiety one of the issues on the table for fall? Is that something that most of you at the university level are considering supporting in some way for your students? And I throw in also mental health, not just anxiety, but the whole range of mental health, because I'm not sure that's been a focus in your plans before.
Well, it hasn't been a focus in their plans, but in the conversations that we've had so far is that we know that many students who have unique abilities will need a lot of support in terms of being safe on campuses or monitoring their own health. And so those were some of the issues that were brought up in some of the meetings that we have had so far. I know that in our conversation with the team from University of North Florida on yesterday, we had several conversations around that.
Hi, good morning.
Anybody have, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Nicole from FIU. Mental health has been an important part of our programming from the day that the student enters campus. We use something called Wellness Recovery Action Plan. It was developed by a psychologist who actually had a psychotic break. And it is a peer-supported plan. It is used in the mental health system, in the recovery mental health world, and we have adapted it for our students. And it is, and we use, from the day they come in, from the first semester, we help them create what is referred to in that training as a crisis plan. So we help them identify their strengths, we help them identify their triggers, we help them create a plan to how to reach out, what are their resources in their area, who are 5 people that they could count on, what words can they use with these individuals that will help guide the kinds of responses that will be helpful to them in their recovery. And since that is part of our normal work with them during the crisis, the first thing during the move to COVID, we did 2 things. We met with them on the day before we moved, and we had IT from the university work with them. We did an all-day training and trial on how to use Zoom. And then after that, we reminded them of their crisis tool and started to ask them things like, and this is normal language we would use anyway, is, you know, what are you feeling? What are your thoughts? Who's in control of this? How can you control or stop yourself from getting COVID? What does COVID look like for you? So we started using language and getting them accustomed to what they can do. Once they move to a remote setting, we have check-ins with the students. So every staff checks in with the students and we use those words. We have we have seminars. So 3 times a week, we do have seminars on independent living stuff, but we do save time for check-ins. And it is weaved very effortlessly into the seminar. And then the other thing we started doing is we started doing groups and bi-weekly check-ins with the team. So the employees get weekly check-ins. We did meditation trainings or mindfulness training actually. And then as the lead, I do check in and I do talk to the team about stress. How do you manage stress? We actually force people to take time off in the middle of the week. Managers do something called taking temperatures. And so they have one-on-one conversations with the team members, so we can take people, quote unquote, take people temperature and then encourage them to take time off or encourage them to do things that will support their positive mental health. And so we have those kinds of conversations weekly, both with the staff and the student. And we do that normally on campus. So we've just upped the amount of times we do that on a Zoom call. And even though we have completed our summer with the students, There will be check-ins, if you will, with students and staff to make sure everybody is sort of handling COVID. We anticipate there will be another lockdown given the numbers. So we are beginning to use that language already, not just with the team, but with the students. And what does that mean? And we are continuing our Zoom parties, we are continuing our movie nights, so at least we can use those forums to continue to take temperatures. It's been working so far, but it's not ideal.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? What are some of the ways that you've been coping and the resources you are using?
I have a question. Is anybody finding any local government or state resources that we can tap in addition to what's normally available to deal with these crises, so that we're able to save our regular resources to do our regular work?
In terms of funding or in terms of?
Anything at all, is any type of additional assistance that people may have been able to garner other than what is traditionally available.
Okay.
I know in Gainesville here, Santa Fe College belonged to the, oh goodness, they call it the COC, Continuum of Care. It's a group of local support services, United Way, homeless shelters, all of those. So we started meeting weekly. Now we've transitioned to bi-weekly. We meet weekly to just talk about what's going on. And through that, we were able to gather that, you know, the state government is offering certain types of things. And then we just share that information with students, and we share it with the people that are in charge and working with these students one-on-one. I just got notification yesterday that they are giving, there's some type of scholarship or money now that they are giving to people. And I just shared that, I got that information yesterday and then I shared it. So I don't know what those types of things look like in your community, but there's Continuum of Care. Getting in touch with United Way might be a good way to connect with some of the things and how they can. One of the requests that I made of the Continuum of Care group is that when students call, because we have many students who might not be expressive in exactly what it is that they are looking for people to be patient and trying to ask questions so they can get to exactly what the needs are. Because some of the students may be struggling because the parents are struggling at home because they've lost their jobs, and they are calling this number. They don't know for people to actually ask follow-up questions so they can get to the root of what they are seeking. So we can help educate our local people as well as them helping us. That's what I know in our area.
It's just hitting me that our local Berkeley County is facing some of the similar dilemmas that we are, as far as moving their programming online, trying to provide services to a similar population, which makes me wonder why I have not thought to call them and see what they're doing that we could replicate, or how we could work together during this time, because they have not had the luxury, like our program hasn't started. So it's been a very small inconvenience for us. But they have just had to completely adapt while continuing, I would think, to provide some level of service, or at least supervision or care, make sure everybody's doing okay. And so they may have learned some things that we can learn from them.
Doug, on a very small but important issue, the other Gwen, the Gwen at FAU has a contact. They were offering
language instructions for Zoom meetings. that they share with students and advocates to help them navigate remote learning using Zoom. And she did include that link in the chat box for everyone.
Thank you, Carol. Any other suggestions or concerns about your plans for reopening?
I placed a question in the chats and a few people had responded, but I'm curious about new students enrolling in the fall and if COVID is impacting that. At UCF, we haven't made our announcements yet. We've just gone through the process. We had to delay the process, did it virtually. Our plan is, as of now, is if the university, we've always remained open, most things are virtual. The UCF plan is to perhaps have some in-person classes. We know that housing will be reduced. So we're seeing what that impact will be with IES. But we haven't made any offers yet. We will shortly. I'm really concerned about yield. Who's going to be able to participate virtually, or if housing is limited, how that might impact. And I saw some responses that FIU, I guess, is delaying the spring. That's something we may still consider. As we all know, this is fluid, but and has any other thoughts about yield for new students in the fall? I'm interested to hear.
Okay, I have sort of a question. I'm not answering your question, Mark, because I don't know what the yield is. But now that we are moving services online, how have we, or how have you dealt with students without computer access or without internet access?
So let me combine both me and Mark's comments and questions, and to summarize how we're thinking, not yet doing, but thinking at FAU. We've divided our student group into two sections, two groups. We have there's a clear distinction between how we can proceed with returning students versus what we think and do with new students. When the zombies struck in mid-spring, like everybody else, we converted to remote instruction. And we discovered that by and large, students at FAU, the academy students at FAU, were remarkably and surprisingly successful in making the switch. And I think it's because we, from the very beginning, even before they're admitted, our students are introduced to technology. When they apply, they have to engage in some technology. If they're admitted, when we have our first orientation, there's discussions about the types of technology that they need, and we try to hook them up with friendly laptops. They take a technology course in the very beginning. The very first semester they're there. So from the very beginning, they get a heavy dose in practical uses of communications, how to use their cell phones. They check in and out whenever they come to campus. Their assignments are tech-based. They're taking classes about tech. At the end of their first semester, they're giving presentations that involve them building PowerPoints to describe. It's the start of their person-centered planning process. But the other thing that happens is that process, that intense first semester, it introduces them to what the heck's it mean to go to college. It's expectations for college life. And that combination of technology and college expectations, I think that only happens with our guys if they're there. I think you have to be present to get much of that. And that has caused us to think about this second group. The returnees, they're doing fine. We're going to have 34 students coming back in fall. That holds us over in terms of a large enough N to have legitimate courses and such. But it's the incoming group. We're having that discussion and have been having that discussion. It's driving the families crazy that we haven't given them answers yet. But I think it's wise to not rush back into fall unless we know that that we're going to be able to replicate their college expectation and their technology use, so that they too can be successful if we have to go back to remote. But starting this group with remote gives me the willies. We've got some discussion going on about maybe January is the best way to think about it. Maybe if we look at our applicant pool, we identify 4 or 5 students whom we know and who have already had some contact, and maybe there's a very small cohort, but I have to wonder whether that's worth it. I too, Mark, am holding back on admissions decisions and hoping, but damn, I got to tell you, every day I look at the news and I see our continued increase. Florida is and is going to increase as a hotspot, and now I'm starting to wonder whether January is going to be enough. But it's a spooky world. But that's kind of the way that's the heuristic we're approaching: returning versus new, and then what's the formula that allowed us to be successful with our students, teaching them remotely.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And yeah, we're assessing as we're going. We have mapped out how to provide every function and program or activity within our program virtually, but we don't know. I don't believe it's the best way to start a group. I agree with you. We haven't been able to, the internship. I mean, we're challenged with the internship. But a question, and maybe we don't need the answer here today, but a thought for the center: if we are delaying enrolling people into the spring, that probably wasn't in our plans as we wrote our grant applications. How might that all impact our grants and things like that is something that it's worth putting out there, because I don't know if we'll be bringing people in the fall. We're planning to, but who knows? So I offer that up.
Well, thank you. Are there other issues or concerns or answers? I know from the chat box we have several people who have indicated that they have face masks that they can support our teams with. So if we have other resources, we can indicate that in the chat box, and we can also ask other questions.
Hey Gwen, this is Lee from OCT, and I know someone, I'm sorry I didn't catch who was that said that comment just a minute ago, but about internships. And so I kind of had a question going off of that, of just kind of best case scenario in a sense of we are back on campus, but doing the social distancing and face masks. We have already had a little bit of concern here at OCT just about continuing those internships, especially as most places are trying to limit the number of individuals who come into their spaces. So I was just wondering if anyone has thought about their internships for for fall and definitely more than likely spring as well, and what maybe some alternatives are that they're looking at as well.
Lee?
So I have thought about our internships, but coming back to campus, I mean, so we have a variety of internships. So some are off campus and some are on campus. So the on campus, I thought that those may not be may or may not be possible for the fall semester, and that we might have to think about doing something off campus. But I've had a lot of students who have been contacting me telling me that they are looking for jobs, and some of them are even getting internships right now and jobs. So I think there's a different type of job market that's opening that we would be able to support off-campus internships more than we would be able to support on campus. And I think we just need to wait to hear from the university and see our schedule as far as how many people will be allowed on campus, what the dining hall services are doing, what the different departments on campus are doing, what the recreation centers are doing, before we can actually decide upon what's going to happen for internships. But we have a course that is a job shadowing course that we're actually offering in the fall. And for that, we were thinking of doing something more virtual and remote, because normally they'll go to a internships site and they'll shadow, they'll tour, they'll see what's going on as far as different jobs that are available to them. But I'm hoping that I'll be able to work with some businesses and maybe even some on-campus departments that will do some sort of like virtual tour with us and some interviews of different people and different positions in the office virtually. So I haven't put that into play yet, but that's kind of the start of our fall internship plan. So.
Angelica, I know that one thing we are looking at doing is a lot of virtual maybe
I don't know.
opportunities and stuff.
I'm going to jump in real quick. Some of you, I'm Jamie Johnson. I'm the career liaison with IES at UCF. Some of you have talked to over the last month and a half about internships. The blessing and curse that we have at UCF is that we have a pretty aggressive work experience and internship program. Our students really are immersed and stick within their track of study. One of our main ones being hospitality and tourism. So it goes without saying that whole internship program has pretty well collapsed like a house of cards, having no hospitality and tourism going on. So we have really discussed at length, and I've again reached out to some of the other schools, how we can move that to a virtual internship. We actually have 4 students whose graduation is pending solely their completion of their internship. And with everything shut down, we are doing our best to either create a virtual internship where we work with business partners to mentor and assign projects, et cetera, to our students at kind of a elevated timeline that still gives them the opportunity to learn the business model, to learn that professional communication element, and to keep their virtual skills honed. Again, with every outbreak and increase in numbers, we're kind of relooking at what that timeline looks like. Some of these businesses aren't operating at all. We've also done a really paid attention to staying in touch with our community partners and our on-campus partners during the shutdown so that we keep us in the forefront of their mind when they're planning when we do come back to campus. So it's a struggle. Everything's kind of a, hey, let's try this idea. I call it my whiteboard method. I jot something down and then erase it and come up with some other option. So I think that's a forum that if anybody has usable, workable ideas, that we may even be able to combine a number of ideas into something that works for a lot of programs across the board, across the state.
I think another issue that we are falling into is that I have a lot of students who have underlying health conditions, and that they don't want to go out into the community, and a lot of them are actually more afraid than anything else. So I feel like pushing them into an internship or forcing them to take their final internship class and to complete graduation is not my place at this time. And so we have been doing the same thing like you have at UCF, trying to, like, the graduation is pending upon the completion of their internship, but we're trying our best to maybe postpone that semester and look into different types of employment preparation for them. So that's another thing that we're really concerned about as well. You know, they're not going to want to search for jobs if they are afraid to. And I have some students every day who are like, yeah, I'm back here, or some students who've worked the entire pandemic. And then there are some students who are like, oh, I've been terminated, but they say they'll call me after the pandemic and all of that. So we have to work with their transitioning back into the community as well. I don't want to put any student in a bad position or outside of their comfort level. So I'm just taking it individual case by case. But obviously, in Orlando, yeah, the hospitality industry is huge. And in this area, they might be able to have a little more, some of the jobs that will be outside a little bit more. So that could be workable for us, but or jobs that are a little more social distancing. So that might be a little more workable. Maybe it depends on the area that you're in, if you're more of a hot spot or not as well. So yeah, if anybody has any ideas, I would love to hear you guys.
I have a question. This is pretty off the wall, but for students that are working in paid internships, are they qualifying for unemployment benefits? And what are we doing to assist them in getting those?
The students who are working in paid internships, it depends on how many hours a week they're working. Some students may be qualifying for unemployment benefits. So we've been the ones who have been unemployed. We've been having weekly Zoom meetings with our students with the job coaches, and the job coaches will be supporting them to check in. Are you filing for unemployment? Are you completing whichever paperwork you need to complete? So we have kind of like our pandemic employment meetings with our students, and we split them up case by case with each job coach. So that's what we've been doing to support. I don't know if it's enough. I mean, we haven't heard anybody having an issue, but for the students who really do need the unemployment benefits, most of them are actually not unemployed and they're back at work. They're either working in Publix or Home Depot or someplace where they can be getting some sort of income. So
I've had an ongoing conversation with several people about adapting to the new normal. Pardon the jargon, but it's the logic that everybody seems to understand it. There's this, some people are advocating that that we embrace the idea that new employment can be work at home, should be more remote employment. And I just have to come back in with caution about that before we embrace that too deeply. I think this could be a turning point where, if the field did go into this direction of thinking that remote employment is an easy option for these guys, so it would be therefore a preferred option. I think we also have to look at the possibility that it's the new segregation. And my concern is deep concern that with a population of people that already face remarkable and complex discrimination about employment, getting and maintaining jobs, that the solution of remote might just be resegregation for a lot of our students that could easily, with support, be employed in communities again. I understand. Yeah, we want to graduate our guys. That's important to do. We want to be able to, sometimes any job is better than no job. But I also understand the unintended consequence of moving too soon to embrace remote employment and remote internships as the logical alternative. It might be logical for a few, I shouldn't say a few, for some, but I don't think it's universally the logical alternative.
Dr. Brady, I'm really glad you brought that up, because we've been struggling with that ourselves. And I think that if we move too many students to remote work learning opportunities or remote employment or remote internship, I think they get less of an ability to understand what it is like to be in an office in the job market. The challenge we face, and I think I really do not know how to solve this problem, so any feedback would be helpful. We have a number of students who are either immune compromised or their parents are immune compromised. And it is actually the parents who are stopping the students from participating in these, in a face-to-face work learning or an internship experience. And just because it's easier to control, we are shifting everything to on campus, just because it's easier for us to ensure social distancing, ensure that the student wears the mask. So it's you know, because that's a new thing, if you will, that they have to contend with, right? Wearing the mask while on the job for the entire period of time. It's not just skill acuity, it's now these secondary types of things that they have to remember. So we've been talking about shifting everybody back to on campus until they get these new skills under control, or at least are comfortable wearing a mask for a long period of time. But our challenge are the parents. We've got parents that are really afraid. And you know, I don't know how to overcome that. And I don't know how to ensure, if we move off campus, that the company, the organization where the student is, will actually do social distancing and ensure people wear the mask. I mean, I go out now in Miami and people are not wearing masks and they are not doing social distancing. And, you know, and I feel a sense of liability if I put our students in a situation where those folks are lax. And I you know, maybe I'm the problem, right? I really don't know how to combat my fear with what is really happening out there. So any feedback would be helpful.
That's an absolutely valid concern. I was actually speaking with kind of my counterpart up at Vanderbilt, and she stated that she had a really big concern that we are going to be replacing the word inclusive with isolated, and that it's a super big concern for them there, because they were bringing a lot of their off-campus internships back onto campus for safety control, having that you know, setting that they could manage and not worry about somebody else managing the setting. And that, you know, with courses going to virtual and everything going to virtual, that we are at risk of losing the ground that these students gained
Exactly.
in the course of their education with us. And that's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all temporary questions for sure, and we'll wrestle with them the same way. Discussions we had, and Tammy brought it to our group, that some of the internships that she was working with, those companies had policies in place and how they were going to create a comfortable. We can't create a safe environment, but a more comfortable environment for everybody. And so we're going to be looking at their language if we go in this route and kind of have some kind of form that the parent and the student are signing off on, you know, because there is some responsibility. Doug, going back to your question about unemployment, in general, college students are not eligible for unemployment. I do know with the one benefit packet that they have, the exceptional paid leave, that people could request up to a couple of weeks of unemployment if they were released for COVID. I think some students can qualify for that, but in general, students don't qualify for unemployment.
I have another rather odd question, and that is that we're looking at this whole thing as if it's short term, and it probably is. But it also reflects a larger aspect of society that is moving. One of the big things, I watched Terry's video last night, and it reminded me of the importance of social development, the college experience, because that was the big thing for him, and it probably was for a lot of us. And so I'm wondering what we're doing, if anything, and I would imagine probably not much now because we got caught flat-footed. Nobody expected something like this to occur. But is anybody doing anything to help students to develop virtual social networks with their peers, both with and without disabilities, like the rest of us tend to do?
I can tell you about an example. I know of that at the University of Cincinnati. They have been working to teach their students how to interact on Facebook, and they've used interventions around narrative to help students develop the skills and to actually have communication with each other and developing those social skills with typical peers as well.
That's probably something that could benefit everybody, those interaction skills on Facebook.
And what was interesting is it generalized really fast. So it was real structured at first, and then the next thing you knew, folks were definitely engaging in it without being prompted or anything else. There is that that social need that is really important for us to attend to at this time. I think that's one of the things that gets exacerbated in these times of being, you know, in our own homes even, right?
Well, and social skills are valuable for employment too. So it's not that it's just a luxury, and it's also quality of life.
At FAU ACI, it took us quite a few weeks to actually find out this was happening, but we had students organize Friday night Zoom dance parties where one of the students would DJ and he'd send out the link to everyone. And that was just them generalizing the Zoom skills they had from class to a social setting. And it took us weeks before we even knew that they were doing it regularly. So that was really nice to hear.
CARD has been also doing a lot of social activities using Zoom. And one of the things that was done early on, just because all of the politically charged posts that are out on Facebook now and how to evaluate information, and some of it's very, like I said, anxiety producing or anger producing, and how to productively have a discussion around hard topics with all people and be respectful and not lose friends over it. So that was a big focus throughout this last month or so.
Doug Kelly mentions the student-initiated social group, but there are a couple of other things that I hope the other FAU people will chip in on. One is we redesigned our, we are heavily engaged in peer mentors, and we redesigned the peer mentoring protocol a bit so that it's more social media based, and the reporting protocols back to us is a little bit different. And if one of you all would chip in with more detail. The other thing that we've done a little bit with is we've started to explore some actual research activity on the use of Zoom and other platforms to promote the social aspects of job interviews and things like that. So those two initiatives might be helpful to others. But it's better that that comes from other staff than me, who actually know what the hell they're talking about.
So what we did on Canvas was we created a Canvas page for the peers and the peer mentors to interact with each other. We also gave the peer mentors topics that they can choose from, including talking about COVID, how they're doing in their classroom, and so forth. And of course, they would able to branch out and broaden those topics. And how we basically allowed the mentors and the mentees to communicate with each other was any way they choose to. If they wanted to use Canvas, they can use Canvas. If they wanted to use, their phone, a lot of them FaceTime, a lot of them WhatsApp app, all that type of stuff. And we made sure that once they interacted with each other, either twice or 3 times a week, they had to log onto the Canvas page and write in the discussion post of what they talked about and how they communicated and when they're going to communicate next. So that's what we did. And we also monitored if the mentors or the mentees were not communicating with each other, because we will log on and look at the discussion and go, oh, I don't see anything in your group. And I would reach out, or the other team members would reach out to the peers and the peer mentees and say, hey, what did you guys talk about this week? Let us know. So that's one thing that we did.
This is Debbie. I just wanted to just point out real quick a couple of the things that were brought up in the chat box to bring your attention to. June posted a document from NTAC, the no-tech to high-tech resources for transition, thinking it might be helpful for thinking through different options. And she also posted a resource, VoqueFit.com, in partnership with Project Search, who is offering free accounts to explore for youth employment options using ONET videos. And then Carol Lewis mentioned that when her students moved off campus in spring and lost their internships, they connected them with professionals in the field of their interest through UGA's alumni mentorship program. So I just wanted to bring your attention to those 3 resources for potential opportunities.
Thank you, Debbie. Anyone else?
This is Susanna from Georgia, and something that our colleges got trained in last year was in peers, the social skills curriculum. So 2 people from each school got trained in that. And when things went virtual, they adapted really quickly. Not all, but some of the schools continued to hold peers. And this summer, I know one of the programs, the one at Georgia State University, has been holding peer sessions this summer. And it's been really helpful to help the students engage in socialization and social skills training in a very structured environment, but also provide them a way to practice these skills in this kind of environment as well. And so, I mean, it's a big undertaking to become a peers trainer, but it is, it's been really helpful for our students to still continue that social skills learning in this kind of environment. And hopefully, they're really able to start using some of their skills to transfer into whatever life begins to look like soon.
Anyone else have any ideas or suggestions? I also know that in Maryland, I apologize for being muted and trying to talk, that they have several peer groups that are meeting via Zoom, and their students are paired with other peers, and they have scheduled times and unscheduled times that they can meet and support each other.
So maybe we can go to, okay, I hope I didn't mute myself. Okay, maybe we can go to talk about what you think your program needs are. I know I had something. Mark mentioned how the center will consider not having enrollment or enrollees for the fall semester and how that would look like. We know that, we've captured that. Are there other types of questions or program needs that you think you have that maybe we want to capture to give to the center for consideration?
Maybe, and this may differ a bit for folks who are getting their first grant or have just submitted for their first grant versus those who have been working through one and maybe coming back for a second. But it may well be worth, from the center's perspective, getting us to report in on new versus returning. If the central metric was how many new students are we getting, none of us are going to do well, and for good reason. But those of us who have been in operation for more than a couple of years have some continuing students, and it might be useful from the center's perspective to differentiate the two groups of students as a metric.
Okay. Thank you.
And that could be something we certainly look at, because as has been mentioned before, everything is fluid and unchanging. I mean, we don't know all of the changes, but that wouldn't hurt, because that is a common issue that people are trying to tackle with, although some institutions really have some creative ideas about how they will move forward. But you're right about that new group. You know, sorry about that. About that new group. And how people will engage them. But, and Michael, are you referring to the annual report in particular, or just getting the report on who's returning and who's not able to? I mean, who are the new and returning students who are not able to come on campus?
Yeah, I was actually thinking more about the grants, but you mentioned the annual. That makes sense too. I mean, that's it's a more immediate report, more immediate deadline, so a more immediate wrestling with metrics opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe both of those things, or maybe even scholarships. What flexibility? What I don't know. I haven't thought about it from that perspective, but maybe an overall institutional approach to this is to divvy up the measures of progress with those coming back versus those not. I'm not even sure if continuing the tracking of graduates, maybe that should be even something that we're wrestling with from a COVID perspective.
Right.
Don't know. I haven't thought that through.
Right, and I haven't looked at some of the reports that have come through, the grant performance or the annual reports. I haven't looked closely at them, but I know in scanning some of them, they are referencing the COVID impact, you know, and so what that means with their current students who are going to graduate, particularly if they had anticipated a summer program and that can't happen. So some institutions, again, and that's just scanning through the data, have already mentioned, here's kind of where we are because of COVID, and we appreciate that. So, and not taking a close look at this time, it wouldn't hurt, because I think that's how it's going to be a natural pan. And I don't think any institution is going to stray away from emphasizing, here's where we were and where to stand still, and particularly with the scholarships. Here's what we thought we were going to do. We've admitted these certain students, or these students are returning, but the state of the state, we can't do that right now. Yeah, so.
I will also say that, first of all, I don't believe that COVID is only going to be here for a short period of time. I think this is going to be a little bit more of a long-term experience for us. as well as it could, most epidemiologists are predicting a cyclical pattern to this. And I wonder if we should be thinking long-term about, how exactly what you were speaking about with Dr. Brady just now, right? So how is this going to impact us? Because this is not just going to be the first round of challenges related to internships or challenges related to graduating students. And so I wonder, and I don't have the answers to any of this, but I wonder if we should be also considering what needs to be done long-term, and put those into place, like having a plan B and putting those into place as this experience or quote unquote new normal becomes a protracted experience, because I do believe it is going to be a protracted experience.
Any other needs to be considered?
Yeah, for new programs, how is the COVID impacting recruiting? What are you doing about recruiting with the assumption that you're going to be bringing students in, but you can't actually,
Right now.
I guess you guys understand the implications. Wait time.
This is Danny at USF, and we're looking at a January start date, but we need to begin the application and recruiting, and will be in July. That's sort of our big planning time. But yeah, I don't have an answer. It's just kind of in my mind. I'm listening to all of you. I know some programs have done virtual interviews, and we were planning on that anyway. But yeah, it'll impact a lot.
This is Debbie. There was a comment or a question in the chat box. Has any institute adjusted their tuition for students due to being more virtual? And they were wondering if parents expressed a want for reduction in tuition. And there was a comment to that, or a response to that, but they were wondering if anyone else had that same concern.
Yeah, at UCF, we have the same tuition fee model as all other students. Parents of general students have brought that up, but we are, we're staying firm with that at the university.
Same at FIU.
And this is Crystal, and I probably used the wrong terminology with regards to transition services costs. So for example, OCT, obviously students audit the courses, but we charge for transition services above what the institute would charge for matriculated students. So I was wondering for institutes that charge for transition fees above courses that the students take, if there has been a request for a reduction. For example, in being experiential before COVID, tuition was not an issue, but I was wondering if things become more virtual and there are less internship opportunities, has any parents asked for a reduction?
Yeah, UC does not have an additional fee, so it's not applicable for us.
Maybe this question is somewhat indicative of the different models of higher ed programs that exist. What Mark mentions, what Nicole mentions, what the experience at FAU is. Our program for college students with IDD is institutionally identical. It is the program that the university operates. And of course, in many colleges and universities, that's not the case. It runs parallel to the usual funding system, admissions system, code of conduct, that it's not integrated into the college or university's regular operations. Those, of course, are going to be face the pressure of what am I getting for my dollar if it's not. But those of us who run programs that are deeply integrated into the life of the university, that's not our call. I mean, I don't get to choose what the tuition rate is for bachelor's or master's or doctoral students or academy students, or what their fees are, or what their tech fees are, and whether or not, how they get a parking sticker. I mean, that's what the university does, not us. But I can see how in other programs where the college program for people with ID is more parallel to the traditional university institutional stuff, that would be a major gig. To my knowledge, the biggest pushback so far on typical college students wanting more for their dollar is coming out of Harvard and Stanford and schools that expect a little bit more, and that's not for students with ID. That's for their regular students.
Okay, we still have about 24-25 minutes left. And I can't believe that we'll be out of things to talk about because there are many things happening right now. So we are open to whatever it is that you think we want to discuss.
I've got another question since we've got time, and that is, our curriculum committee is we're going to be starting a new program, and to get the courses approved, they want to know what textbooks we're using as we put through the course. So I've written to Pearson and McGraw-Hill and requested exam copies and gotten no responses from them. And I don't know if it's because of COVID or if because they think I'm joking. I've been kind of busy lately, but next week, first thing, I'll be giving them a call. I'm wondering what other people, I found a very good website for curriculum that would cover all kinds of stuff, but I'm wondering what other kinds of resources people are using, and I'll post the website on the discussion board for anyone that's interested. But what type of textbooks or curricular resources are you finding effective, and where are you getting them? Is there a different publisher than the standard McGraw-Hill, Pearson, Brooks, etc.?
Let me ask somebody from FAU to speak to that. We generally, Doug, we generally don't use textbooks. We've gone to great lengths from the beginning, and I'm not completely sure, but I think I could say that our curriculum is textbook free. But there may be a course or two that requires. But we've taken another route. I wonder if Brianna or Kelly or Angelica could speak to that.
Every class I've ever taught does not have a textbook. I'm pretty sure we are completely textbook free. We've amassed some free curriculum that has been created by others from, I think we have something from like the University of Massachusetts for a health course that I'm going to be teaching this summer. We incorporate some like novellas into some of the classes, but we don't require our students to purchase those at all. And we've created a lot of our own materials that we use, but we are not using actual textbooks in any of our classes.
It just seems as we recreate the college experience, we ought to give students the same opportunity to complain about the price of books.
Our university has been pushing back against requiring students any student to purchase textbooks. They're really getting into the ebooks or online free resources for students. There's been a lot of pushback by the students and therefore the higher ups at the university to stop using really, really expensive textbooks.
We've been putting them on reserve in the library, and I've been doing that, and I shouldn't say this, with exam copies.
Doug, someone just mentioned PNC financial literacy curriculum in the chat box. And FDDC website has text materials that are free.
Thanks.
You know, every once in a while, legislature asks for input before they develop rule and regulation, or rule, I guess, and therefore policy. And I think we might want to consider that, because nobody knows, everybody was caught by surprise, almost everybody. There may come an opportunity, there may come a time in the not too distant future when the Leggy comes back and says, okay, you experts on college for people with ID, what do you think we ought to do if in fact this is not a transitional state? But if this becomes a 2 to 3 year state, or a long-term or a permanent way of life, what would college for people with ID look like from the very beginning? And I wonder if we might want to be a little bit proactive in having a small task force, a group of people start to put some ideas together with the idea, what if COVID doesn't go away, or it morphs into COVID-20 or COVID-21? What if this looks like a longer term way of life rather than a 1 or a 2 year way of life? And maybe if we had some conversation, if the Leggy does ask, then we've got maybe we've taken a few steps down the road with some, definitely don't do this, but yeah, we could do that. I have no idea what that would look like, but I'm sure there are some forward thinkers. I want it to be just like it is. Now, I'm sure, but I think if they do ask for input on policy, this would be the people they would come to. Maybe even, or they'd go out of state probably for it. But
I know you're kidding, right?
No, I love that idea, Dr. Brady, and I think that, you know, I think that having a few meetings and putting together a 1 or 2 page white paper, no more than 2 pages, because we know they don't read, it would be helpful, at least to Janice, because I think that's who they will go to. I think it would be helpful to Janice that in her dialogue with them, because it would be good if we could outline first challenges that we're having and see if we can problem solve, and then sort of talk about what kinds of changes need to occur should COVID be long-term. And by the way, the university system is having this conversation now. So I think it behooves us to join in and provide feedback to our own leadership at our own institutions so that we are speaking with one voice, right? So our institution is mirroring what Janice would say to the leadership, to the legislature.
That's a great conversation. And, you know, I don't know, I haven't seen Janice and I don't know, well.
I'm here.
Now I see you, yeah.
I've been in and out, had to jump in and out, but I am here.
Yeah,
I think that's,
but I think that's an awesome idea because we all know how our leaders work. They kind of impose. So the more proactive we are, the better things will be. And I think I like that idea of actually writing something 2 to 3 page, you know, maybe 1 or 2 pages white paper, give it to Janice, because when she gives her annual report, that might actually be part of the annual report, because this is where we are right now. This is the reality. And then it will kind of help her in helping the state and helping each of us too, so that when we go to each individual institutions, we know how we speak and what we contribute. So I love that idea. What a great idea.
I don't know if anybody else, other places, somebody must be having the conversation. The Think Colleges of the world, the Eric Carr, the Vanderbilts, the Western Carolinas, the George Masons. There are folks around that have national leaders that might be thinking about this, and maybe we engage them in some conversation as well. That I would not want us to do this in isolation of what others, especially if there's others that have already started this conversation with the premise, what if? That would be good to get input from others as well.
Yes. Yeah.
This is Susanna, and I know that Think Colleges started to have some of those conversations. I don't know how developed they are, you know, just because we're living in this constant state of flux, but I do know some of those things have started to bubble up and started to be talked through.
right. And I don't think anybody has come up with the suggestion that you have though, Michael, and that is the maybe a resolution and what Nicole mentioned, looking at challenges and changes, you know, just kind of outlining that. I don't think there is a white paper per se, but it certainly is definitely conversation that we've been having, but nothing in format. And certainly as I look at annual reports, and you're right, writing the annual report and submitting it to everyone in the state, it would need to be part of the conversation. And anytime I can reconnect with the Senate Appropriation Committee, they want the update. And in a recent conversation, just a week or so ago, that's on their mind as well. And again, with what you all have said earlier, not knowing and taking it slow. The legislation may make changes, but it's not make changes in some of our requirements and thinking about it, but also that it's not left up to the legislation to implement. It is left up to the institutions. And so whether our colleagues in the chancellor's offices thinking it through with our administration at each institution, it is a conversation. So yeah, everyone is like this, up in the air, and thinking about it and watching, because we don't know. But it's excellent conversation, and I will definitely follow through with the recommendation. It's very helpful. And tapping some of you for conversation.
On a maybe level down question, I'm wondering if there's anyone on the forum today that would be interested in maybe getting together like a best practices group across the state of Florida. I know there's some out there, but state specifically, we have different levels of assistance from the state, different levels of supports than New York and Tennessee and some of the other states that we interact with. And if we could get together, I would love to have the opportunity to Zoom meet with anybody that's involved in work experience and internships, maybe once a month, just to say, hey, we're trying this, or hey, somebody had this idea, or we did that and it was a total failure or a total success. I don't know if anybody's interested in that, and we could do it across the board depending on what your specific job focus is.
Another thing to think about is the changes that are coming to VR in terms of services in October, and how to, or some of you may already, at least in Florida, be hooked in as vendors for VR, but how these changes could impact additional sources of funding for some of the things that you're already doing in these classes and programs that you're running.
And I would say, you know, with the thought, what I do appreciate is people thinking about subgroups and getting together. We could certainly host something or request something. And I think a more powerful way is like Tammy volunteering and to discuss anything about work related and problem solving. If that's something that you would like the center to host, we can host meetings like that. If that's something to help you get started, and that certainly would help us feedback. We can, you know, we do Zoom webinars forever. We can host those. If you want to network out and have us join, and then we problem solve that way, we are open to whatever it is that's going to support us and problem solve, but also help not only just lead in Florida, but maybe some ideas and lead with the nation of how we are doing some problem solving. So I am open to either way. If you know you want to, and I think it'll be important to reach out across not just the universities, but with our state and technical schools as well. And with us doing this networking, I am getting feedback of how good it is to work within each like type. We can keep it that way, or we can cross, because the technical schools certainly have some unique ways in which they do things, but and it can inform our universities and state colleges. So we will follow through and most definitely be willing to host any engagement in the way that you all would like to move forward with some solid documentation that could be forwarded and help us do the programs in the way that we like for them to be done. So thank you.
And I will also continue to gather and compile information. I know I'm not in the state of Florida anymore, but certainly there are other states around the nation that are grappling with these same issues, and we are addressing those issues in other areas as well. And so I can contribute documents that I've compiled and information that I have also. So I'd be happy to contribute that.
And this is Susanna. You know, we're happy to support, you know, national and regional dialogue through the Southeast Post-Secondary Ed Alliance as well. We have our conference coming up the end of next month. It's virtual, and we're still trying to, you know, think through some of the topics that we want to have a discussion around, not just present on. So we're happy to support you guys and support the Southeast and the nation however we can.
That's awesome. Awesome and very current and timely. Thank you.
Great. Well, we seem to have 8 more minutes. If there are other questions or issues that we need to address or want to address during that time, and we certainly want to thank everyone and make sure that your needs are being heard and met as best as we can. So if you have other issues that we didn't address, if you want to bring them up now or send us a message or put it in the chat box, we are certainly open.
Speak or never hold your peace. No, just kidding. No, there's lots on your minds, and And every institution is really doing an awesome job just making the adjustments. And we are taking the lead from what the institutions at whole are doing, you know, and then how do we make adjustments to make sure our students are getting what they need and our programs remain rigorous and wholesome, and we continue to offer what we say we would. And so the response has been phenomenal, I think, at each institution of how you've just just made that switch. And like Michael said, been surprised of how well students have actually adjusted. It is the continuation, you know, it is the continuing to bring new folks on and doing that which none of us ever anticipated being online, and don't still call it that, but you know, that's where we are. So then what? What do we do? Because yeah, seeing it 2 years out, that's what I see, but you don't know. And so where do we go? And it certainly is a concern with many of you is, okay, what do we do with our funds? Because we really think about our funding on the grant side for those who have grants. How do we do that? And what I've seen with some of you, you've just shifted the level of support tremendously, realizing we need more mentors, we need more, we maybe had one job coach, okay, we need another one. How do we put more people one-on-one and not have this a segregated opportunity to keep it as inclusive as possible, particularly when you're thinking about the internships, but.
You know, Janice, I was going to leave this alone, but since you mentioned funding, the grants, the support right now goes to individual, as it should. That's the way to get individual incentives moving. But maybe there's some thinking that could go on about statewide, a couple of small RFAs for statewide projects. And maybe one project would be, you know, a white paper on the future. Maybe the what if question specifically. Maybe another small grant, open it up to folks statewide on remote internships. Or on remote job coaching, or maybe there are 3 or 4 of the topics that we talked about today that would be worth an investment of a small amount of money, and not nearly the levels of the enhancement grants or things like that. But maybe that would also pour some juice into the movement to do some statewide thinking and task forces and groups and things like that. Maybe that would also include some funds for such as some outside folks, maybe in order to get 5 or 6 folks from outside to meet with a task force of state folks around the state to help us brainstorm and think and come up with some possibles. Maybe a couple of statewide mini grants. And I don't know if you're able, not able, prohibitive, expressly prohibited or whatever, but not linking it to the actual operations of any individual program, and therefore opening it up to some collaborations that, you know, I'm thinking out loud.
I love about you, Michael, you are very good about thinking out loud and have some good ideas. So I do appreciate that. Yeah, there are some limitations, but you know, as you're thinking, I am thinking about where the budget buckets are, and thinking, well, maybe that'll come under professional development and workshops somehow, not grants more so, but maybe under I know when the center initially started, we had workshops, you know, as getting people on board and understanding the purpose of the center and clarifying the legislation. So I think some creative ideas can come. It may not come in the form of grants, but it certainly could come with resources. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
And I want to add that CEC is also hosting some webinars on how to make sure we are meeting the IDEA requirements and other requirements for individuals who have unique needs during this pandemic. And there's some other agencies that are putting together resources to assist. And again, I will continue to compile those resources and share them with your leadership.
Thanks, Gwen.
Thank you all very much. It's 10:29. So,
Can I say one more thing real quick? This is Debbie. So I've been taking notes throughout this whole conversation. So I will send those to someone, and if anyone is interested, just to capture the whole conversation. And I tried to pull everything from the chat box and things that you all have talked about into an outline and notes to help. I know this was recorded, but if you're like me, I like to also have something to see in writing as well. So I'll send that along after I clean it up a bit.
All right, thank you, Debbie. And we are definitely interested.
That'd be great, because I did have to leave the room. And when I left the room, recording stopped. So I think we probably missed about 5 minutes of recording when I left out. So, and I know June is also taking notes. So really appreciate it, Debbie.
Thank you. I think you can give it to Drew. Drew knows who he's moved into this room.
Yeah.
From the comprehensive list. So.
Yeah. We're learning. We're working it out. We're getting it. We'll be even better in November. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we have lots of comments in the box from everyone and those comments are thanking everyone for sharing and saying how wonderful this has been, and they are definitely interested in continuing the dialogue. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
All right.
Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 That's cute.